You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry.
Hello, Served Up friends. Julie here. I'm thrilled to introduce Frances Creighton, President and CEO of WSWA. That stands for Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. Frances shares his insight leading the largest trade organization for wholesale beverage alcohol in the country and probably the world. If you're curious about the three-tier system and how your favorite wine or spirit shows up in your local restaurants and stores, you're in for a treat. Now sit back, grab your favorite glass of wine or spirit, and get inspired. Frances, we are so excited to have you on Served Up today. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Frances, thank you for being on the show. Can you tell our listeners what is WSWA and how does it support the beverage alcohol industry?
Well, again, thank you for having me. WSWA is the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. We're a trade association that represents the wholesale tier in wine and spirits. So what does that mean? What's a trade association? A trade association is a voluntary assembly of companies in a particular industry that come together mainly for advocacy, but also for things like a convention or for doing professional development, training, data, those kinds of things. The things that benefit an entire industry rather than just any one individual company. We do this in an antitrust sensitive way because we are all competitors, right? All of you and your other wholesalers are out there competing against each other every day. But there are some places where it makes sense to work together. And that's what the association is here for. We have a board that's broadly representative of the entire wholesale tier. We have large companies, including yours. We have small companies. We have companies from franchise states. We have companies from non-franchise states, single state players, multi-state players, East Coast, West Coast, all over the place, right? We have everybody. We represent about 85% of all the wine and spirits sold at wholesale in the country. And we're in every community. Why are we in every community? Because wholesalers are in every community, right? When you really think about what the wholesale tier is, because of how we operate, we're in every single state, every single community in the country. That means that when we work on things like advocacy, where we're talking to members of Congress or state legislators or anybody else, who's our best advocate? It's wholesalers. It's the people in the states who are actually doing the work every day, who are building the relationships and do that. And we help facilitate all of that. We also run a convention, which we just had not too long ago. And I think you guys were there having a lot of conversations and sharing those conversations with your audience, called Access Live. Access Live this year was in Las Vegas. And it brought together about 2,600 people, wholesalers, suppliers, retailers, all three tiers in one place. We also had a lot of service providers of different kinds who were there helping our industry be even better, right? So we bring everyone together so that we can have conversations about business, that we can have conversations about the future of the industry, have a little fun, network, and just get to spend time physically with each other. It was a really pretty extraordinary few days out in Las Vegas, but that's not all we do, right? So we do advocacy, as I talked about. We have this convention called Access Live. And then the last thing we do is we help your companies with professional development. So we run a few different, really, I think, great efforts. We have something called the Women's Leadership Council, which brings together women executives and up and coming executives from across the wholesale tier to have an opportunity to network with each other, to learn from each other, and to think about the future of their careers and everything else. We have something called the Council for Leadership Development, which is an opportunity for younger people to come together, both in ownership and in management, to come together and network and to think about how their careers are going to move forward. Julie, you and I are working on something called the Talent Development and Diversity Council, which is an effort by WSWA to help our companies identify talent internal and bring them up through the process to think about diversity and what diversity means in our companies, and to bring them forward, because we just think that that's a real value for everybody. So really, those are the different buckets that we have. We convene people at a convention. We help do professional development, and we do advocacy. But one last thing before we go, and that is we are really leading the industry on bringing data into the business. So we run something called SipSource, which is the leading data source for the industry, right? Because look, this is a diffused industry. We've got thousands and thousands of retailers, on-premise, off-premise, and it's hard to figure out what's happening in the retail tier. But there's a lot fewer wholesalers, right, across the country. And so what we do is we provide actual, real depletion data coming from warehouses, what's being sold, what's going out on trucks, going out into the community. And these data are relatively new to the market, but already they're having a huge impact. So we do lots of things, but those are a couple of examples.
No, it's a great, I feel like sometimes we get so used to different terminology and different trade groups. And when we have people even within the industry that don't really understand the different organizations. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us. Can we just step back a little bit? Because I know, you've been appointed as CEO president in the last year or so. Mm-hmm. What brought you to this side of the business? And, how's your experience been so far? And is it a lot different from prior roles you've had?
Than working in the financial services business? Yes. I can tell you that working in wine and spirits is a lot more interesting than thinking about how the Basel III endgame is going to impact credit standards for large financial institutions. Yes, absolutely. This is a more interesting business. But why did I get into this? I started this process about 2 years ago, talking to a committee of the board of WSWA. And I really aggressively pursued this because these products that we represent, that we bring to market every day, that we help retailers sell, have been an important part of my life in a quite responsible way, right? But they've been an important part of my life. I can't tell you how often, whether it's during my time on Capitol Hill or in the financial business, during my time in the Clinton administration, where there have been very difficult, knotty issues and difficult people. And you had to connect with them. You had to bring people together. And the way to do that was to go down across the street to the local restaurant, bar, saloon, whatever you want to call it, and grab a drink and talk over it and just get everyone's temperature down and get out of the office and into somewhere else. I've built relationships, trusting relationships, deeper relationships because of these products. When I go home with my family, we open a bottle of wine, and it's one of the ways that we all kind of level set and get onto the same page. My wife and I travel as civilians, as paying customers to some of the big wine and spirits showcases around the country in Aspen or South Beach or other places. I love this industry. This industry really matters, and specifically wholesaling, which I know is a weird thing to say as a consumer, but I spent a lot of time in the UK. And I love going to pubs in the UK. It's one of my favorite things. I used to live there for a while. When you go to a pub in the UK, every pub is radically different. You've got, ye old Cheshire cheese and ye old, pig's head and all of these places. And they're so unique. They're so, until you look behind the bar. And in the bar, you see if it's a bar that's basically owned by one supplier, there's one product set. And you look at the beers and it's the same set of beers. You go to another pub, if it's owned by the same supplier, it's the exact same product set. Whereas I tend to go to there's a dive bar right up the street from here called Post Pub. If you're ever in DC, let me know. I'll take you there. It's an absolute dive, but it's the best dive. They got great greasy burgers and two kinds of wine, red and white. You ask them what kind of red, they pick up the bottle and it just says red wine. That's the kind of place it is. But behind the bar, they've probably got 15 different whiskeys and a half dozen tequilas, not just from one supplier, but from multiple suppliers, reflecting that owner's perspective on what he wants to have at the bar, not just a corporate behemoth telling him this is what you're going to stock. Our members, your employees, help that company figure out, what is this bar about? Who are you? And what is your product mix going to say about you? Right? I love that. I love that our industry in the US has variety, right? Not just variety. Oh, I can get vodka or gin. I can get tequila or mezcal, but variety of different suppliers, different styles. And I think that's what, as wholesalers, we bring to the market. I find that really great. And I'm really happy to be here. I've been here for about a year and a half, and it's the best job I ever had.
Well, that's a big statement, Francis. That's amazing.
And I've been doing this for 30 years, so it's a long time. And I've had a lot of jobs.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I love, you're really talking about that diverse menu, right? When you have just so many things that you can choose from. And with that, I know that diversity is something that is very near and dear to your heart, and that you did mention just a few moments ago about the WSWA Talent Development and Diversity Council. Can you talk to that and tell the listeners, why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to you and to the industry?
Yeah, thanks for that. Why is it important to the industry? I'll start there, and then we'll go to me. So why is it important to the industry? Because we have to serve everybody, right? We serve every community in the country. And if we're going to be serving every community in the country, then we need to understand every community in the country. I was at one warehouse, for example, and we were going around doing the warehouse tour. And I said, do you do any beer? And they said, well, yeah, we do a little bit of beer. I said, well, what do you do? Oh, we do one brand of beer. So that's really strange. Why would you do just one brand of beer? And the GM says to me, well, we do the one brand of beer because it's a Portuguese brand. And we have a Portuguese community that we serve, that we own. We are the leader in that community. We serve all of those restaurants. It's very small, but it's very cohesive. And we want to be their wholesaler of choice. And that means we bring everything in to that place. So that's really interesting. Like, what does that mean to you? That means that for that company, they are the leader because they're able to understand what that retail community needs on premise and off from the wholesaler, right? So for the industry, being diverse, having people who can understand the Portuguese community, the African-American community, the Latino community, increasingly the Asian community, is money. It matters, right? We were at Access Live last year in 2023. I was walking the floor with one of our members, a senior executive at a company, and we came across a Baijiu vendor. And, it was a whole lesson about Baijiu. Well, the Asian American community, particularly the Chinese American community, is growing by leaps and bounds in this country. But me, as an Irish Italian American, I don't see that world. I don't know that product. We keep hearing about how the demographic of the country is changing very rapidly, and that as it changes, consumer tastes are changing. Product is getting a little bit sweeter, for example. So we have to understand this if we're going to understand what's going on in the market. And when we live in a world where it's a relationship business, and if it's a relationship business, then who are you going to hire? A lot of times you're going to hire the people that you know because you have a relationship with them. You've already know the people. So you can say, oh, great, you should come on board and join me. But is that really serving the company to the degree that it could? Or do we have to make an extra special effort to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I need somebody who can go into this set of nightclubs, who can go into this set of off-premise retailers and bring them in. So diversity is important for the business. And we're going to make more money if we can better serve those markets, which are an increasing demographic, and our customers are going to be happier, right? So there's that. Why is it important for me? I'm the least diverse person in the world as a cisgendered white guy in this country, right? But I think you can't look at the state of the country that we have today and not say that, if you're interested in having a more equitable society, a society that serves everybody, that we all have to do our part. And one of the things that I found in this industry is that, and I think part of it is because we are family owned, because we are a community of companies that believe in doing the right thing, that our members have told me that this is a priority for them as it is a priority for me. And so if we want to see the world get a little bit better, then we each one of us, the three of us on this call and all of our companies have to do what we can to make it a little bit better. Here's the good news. Our companies are already highly diverse, right? If you walk into our warehouses, we have all kinds of people running the lines, driving, packing, and in the executive suites, right? We have people around. That's why the effort that we're running is called the Talent Development and Diversity Committee, because it's also partially about taking those people who are already working in our companies and helping elevate them, providing the support that they need to make it to the next level, to give them a fair shot to, quote unquote, graduate to the executive level, if that makes sense, to go out on sales calls, to do all the things that we wouldn't otherwise do. Before we even start recruiting outside of the company, let's look at what we have inside the company and work with those folks. That's why it's Talent Development and Diversity Committee. And by the way, just one last point. Diversity has to be about more than just your ethnic background, the color of your skin, right? It's also, we live in a world where we want to focus as much as we can increasingly on making sure that people who are neurodiverse have opportunities. And in a lot of ways, where's a better place to work than in a warehouse? If you're somebody who thinks in that way, how can we make sure that positions that can be done by differently abled people are able to? How can we go and find those people to bring them into those jobs? We can't just think about diversity in just one narrow way. We have to think about it broadly. How do we get people who look at the world differently from the way we do? Because there's business to be done there if we can get out of our own heads and think about things in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, that I love that whole explanation. And, I think it goes back to what you're saying, Francis, of being in those pubs in London and knowing, okay, this is owned by so-and-so because everything in there is within the same portfolio. And the difference in the US, because we have the 3-tier system, and that could probably be a whole nother episode where we go through what that is. But for
I'm down
our listeners,
for it. You just say when, and I'll do that other episode with you.
You and I can geek out over that. I love talking about it too. But, being that in the US, we are the only country in the world that has this 3-tier system, right? And that does provide that diversity of products to the consumer, to the retailer, so that they can have that Portuguese beer, the Irish whiskey, the this, the that, and maybe even the bijou from China because they saw that the wholesaler has it available. And it really is, I think, when I look at diversity of product and brands that we all sell and they're all our babies, the people are the same way, right? And it's about how do we provide options? And yes, it is good for business. And as we continue to prioritize and bring people in that are diverse into various roles within the company, with that also comes innovation, right? It comes new ideas, new products. And we're seeing that more than ever in the industry with not only do we have our, I call them like our foundational brands and our suppliers that really, have done a lot of the lifting when it comes to the beverage industry. There are so many new suppliers and new diverse people that are coming in with new brands, probably more than any other industry, right? It's not as, when you think of like CPG in general, they kind of come in a very similar way with maybe this similar backing, similar process. Whereas in alcohol, it's like, Bridget's best friend is now, producing a whiskey and this company has started this new brand. What are your thoughts with all the innovation and new suppliers that are coming into the mix and how wholesalers can kind of take advantage of that or leverage that new innovation that's coming into the market?
Great question. I love going out. My wife and I are out almost every night, and at a variety of different kinds of places. And one of the places we go to is kind of a funky restaurant with a small but eclectic wine list, right? And so I'm in this place and I've had some really interesting Italian whites and reds from different regions. One day he comes up and he says, I want you to try this. And I had never had Georgian wine, that amber colored Georgian wine. And I didn't know what I was getting into and I was really skeptical of it, but I trusted him, right, as the restaurateur, and so I gave it a try, and it was fantastic. It's a great wine. I don't remember the brand, but that probably is better for this situation anyway. I tried this wine and I really loved it. That innovation that restaurateur had by having something that just blew my mind, and I drink a fair amount, right, of different kinds of product and everything. So when I get to try something that's truly new, that guy is a friend for life. I'm a friend of the house and I'm going to go there as often as I can. And whatever he puts in front of me, I'm going to give it a try. And I'm not going to like some of it, right? That's part of the adventure of trying new things means you're not going to always like things. And that's okay. But that's the adventure of being out there and thinking of our sense of taste as not just we think of our sight, we think of our hearing, but our sense of taste is so acute. It's so strong. And if you're willing to go on an adventure, you don't have to climb a mountain or go into a volcano. You could just go to dinner and try something that you've never had before and taste that earth that brought you some product and understand it. And that's the best, right? Like, why wouldn't we do that? So that retailer, my point is that on-premise retailer, that restaurateur comes up with something new, shops it into his customer base and builds a deeper, more meaningful relationship with that customer base because they trust him to take them on an adventure. So you have that. Let's go in the complete opposite direction. Let's say that you have a supermarket, a large scale national chain level supermarket that is buying RTDs, right? Okay. So 10 years ago, RTDs really kind of take off. They're all malt. It was not an easy thing for those retailers to move from or to diversify their product base and go just from malt into the spirits-based RTDs, right? It's hard because, particularly in the world of ready-to-drink products, whether it's beer or canned coffee, people get they get more brand loyal on those products than they often do on wines or other products, right? So those retailers took a risk by purchasing something new, by putting out the capital, and they didn't know if it was going to sell, right? But our members, our wine and spirits wholesalers, and in certain states, beer wholesalers, were pushing these canned cocktails that were spirits-based and said, look, these are good products. People are going to buy them, put them out there. And they did it. And what happens? Now, one canned cocktail is now the leading spirits brand in the country, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't just happen. That's not just something that, the market does. There are millions of individual people, retailers, wholesalers, consumers who have to take a flyer and say, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. And when you think about the ground level marketing, where a large company can put out a spirits-based, ready-to-drink cocktail and say, all right, we need this to be out there. We wanted to. Who do they turn to? They turn to us. They turn to wholesalers in the wine and spirits space and say, let's do the ground level marketing. We'll do the magazine publishing. We'll do the, to the degree that they do TV ads. We'll do all of that. But we need you to be on the ground actually selling this product into individual accounts and getting them to understand that this is a good risk. Look, if you're going to do innovation, part of the very definition of innovation is you're taking a risk. But it's one thing to take a risk. It's another thing to know that you have a partner in a wholesaler who's standing next to you and saying, you're taking a risk, but I'm taking this risk with you. We're going to jump in together. And I think that that's an important part of what we do. And it leads to more innovation. Look, the easiest thing in the world would be we all just keep selling the exact same thing that we've been selling, and everybody's happy. But we know that leads to a stagnant market, and consumers will go out and they will discover other things. So, innovation is what we do. It's easy. I know it's not easy. It's easy for me to say it's easy, but it's easy to go out and sell, as you were talking with Julie, the legacy brands that we have, the things that we've been selling for 190 years, the same brown liquid, the same clear liquids, and just push them out the door. Mm-hmm. It's harder to do the new stuff, but that's where it's fun.
Yeah. And it's harder to meet their growth expectations as well.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, exactly. And
because everybody wants to grow. Nobody's happy with, status quo for sure.
Sure. But think about the different approaches that different companies have had to increasing their share of the market, right? You take some brands, over the last 20 years who have been legacy brands, and they've gone and they've extended their product line, right? Mm-hmm. So they've, take a vodka that was it was vodka, and then the variety of flavored vodkas, or whiskeys and a variety now of flavored whiskeys. The fact that rum now is kind of moving into, I think, a really interesting place where we're going to see more barrel aged and kind of premium rum brands. They're getting further and further out to the market. Meanwhile, you have new entrants that are just trying to push out new things. I think about, a peanut butter flavored whiskey or marshmallow flavored whiskey, things like that, right? So the innovation, the fun thing is that the innovation comes from both directions, right? The innovation can come from the large established houses that are controlling a lot of market share and are saying, we're not satisfied controlling this market share. We want even more. And so they're putting out more and interesting ideas. Meanwhile, you've got the other folks coming at them from the bottom saying, we can do it even better. And who's the winner in all of that? The consumer. The consumer who's got a million choices. Look, in our business, we don't worry about, are there too many, are there enough choices for consumers? We actually worry about SKU proliferation, right? There's just so many products that are available to everybody. How do you even get through all of that? That's a real strength of our system. And as a consumer, again, like I wasn't in the business until a year and a half ago. As a consumer, this is the best thing in the world for me, because I can go on an adventure every day for a year and never drink the same thing twice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen to that.
I think you could even do that with like one category, right?
That's right. That's right. You could just do vodka.
I love that. 365 days of the year of whiskey or vodka or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Julie, Bridget, let's do that. Let's the three of us. We can go on. We can do a blog, and we can we could do that every day for. I'm not sure that my doctor would agree with me, but we could do that every day for a year.
Yeah, I'll tell that. That's funny.
Francis, can you give some advice to a small supplier that's really just starting out that wants to get noticed and picked up by a wholesaler?
Yeah, the first thing you should do is to go on to the WSWA website, WSWA.org, and look up our Access Craft Playbook. So this is something that our team here has done, led by my friend and colleague, Michael Bilello, to help these smaller, newer, often mom and pop brands figure out, how do you have a path to market? How do you get into the wholesale tier? To what degree do you have to self-distribute for a while and then kind of graduate up? To what degree do you use a boutique wholesaler and really focus there? The instructions are there. The playbook is there. I mean, we literally called it the playbook, right? It's there, and you should look that up. But then what I'd also say is, and it says it in there, the most important thing isn't the label. It's not the bottle, although they're important. At the end of the day, the most important thing is what's in the bottle, because that's really it. If you've got a great product, everything else becomes easier, right? Now, I'm not saying it's easy to get to market, because it's not. It's a challenge right now, particularly with so many brands proliferating across the market. But if you've got a solid product, you're going to have a leg up over everybody else. Mm-hmm. Let's take, for example, there are brands out on the market that have worked with us for a long time, and they're thriving. We have a program that we have, our Access Craft program, where we actually kind of mentor small brands so that they can make their way to market. It's one of the things that we're proud of. For example, at Access Live, which we just had in Las Vegas, as I mentioned earlier, we have something called Brand Battle, where companies can can apply to be a part of the contest. We have about a half dozen individual contests. So like a whiskey contest, a tequila and mezcal contest, a miscellaneous contest, which might cover everything from baijiu to a espresso martini. And all of these individual things that we do before Access Live, and then the winner of each of those categories comes to Access Live, and we refer to it as kind of a Shark Tank like event on stage at Access Live, where each of the winning brands get to make a pitch to a panel of wholesalers and retailers and say, this is my product. This is why it's fantastic. They try it. They ask them questions. Who are you marketing to? What's your price point? They pepper them with questions, and then they go back and they make a decision, and then we award the Brand Battle championship. This industry is all about finding the next big thing. That's what we do. That's where your company and each company, that's where you compete against each other, right? I mean, that's where you guys have your special sauce that you have, whether it's in the wine space or in the spirit space, increasingly and in the NA space. You've got the portfolio that's going to get more retailers on or off premise to work with you, right? And that's what each of our companies are doing. That's their whole trick, right? Is how do I get this retail account to buy more stuff from me and less stuff from my other competitor? How do you do that? Having the best product mix, mm-hmm. right? How do you do that? By going through this process. That's where we as an industry are so innovative, because it's good business to be innovative. We're not doing it for the sake of doing it. We're doing it because we can sell more product and get more share.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up the website. That's personally where I send people, because as you know now, being in the industry a couple years, a year and a half, and Bridget, I know we get it all the time. It's, hey, you have to bring this wine in, or so-and-so has this wine, or so-and-so has this spirit. Where should we go? And I feel like at this point, I kind of give them the same intro or recommendation. And it's so nice to now be like, go on WSWA. They have a playbook, because I know that was all introduced a couple years ago. Start there, because it's not always, obviously we work for Southern Glazers. It's not always the best wholesaler to sign up with if you're still at the very beginning of your journey. So I like how you said sometimes it's self-distributing until you get to this point and then to this point. So there's a different stage in the journey with every brand. And each of our companies, I think, have, a business model of what we're trying to do. But there's something for everybody, which I think is so special about the business. But you mentioned the brand battle, and last Access Live in Orlando, we needed for the RTD seltzer battle. You guys needed one more brand, because I think somebody backed out. And I have another friend that's like, hey, I've got this seltzer, which was Tigo Tequila. And, she's been calling me for advice. And I reached out and I was like, hey, they're having this big convention, WSWA, which she's already been on the website, downloaded the information. They need a seltzer to be part of the battle. And she went, and they actually won. And so for her, and this was, last year in Orlando, but for her, she was like, just being able to be a part of the brand battle and do this like Shark Tank activity. I think the judges were from some of the bigger chains, right? I think there was like a Kroger buyer and Albertsons. So they were able to like give them their entire plan when, and have access to do that, when that's one of the hardest things that any brand can get access to, is getting in front of some of these big retailers, right? Even some of our bigger brands have a hard time getting in front of them. So I love that you brought that up, because it's been super successful. And I hope that that's something that, WSWA continues to do.
We did a couple of other interesting things at Access Live over the last couple of years, which I thought really were of service to the small brands who participated. One is we had, like the Apple Genius Bar, where, you can't figure out how to make that one really useful function of your phone to actually work. And you go and like a guy, it's often a guy, but it's not always a guy, says, oh, here's how this works. And well, we we asked wholesalers to come and to sit at the Genius Bar, and just to allow companies to come up and say, like, hey, how does this part of it work? Like, what is it that you're doing? What do you think of my label? I spent a lot of money on this bottle. Does it work? That kind of thing. And people come back to us and they're like, that was really helpful. He said my bottle was terrible, but now at least I know, and I can move to something more neutral, and I'm going to save a lot of money, and it's going to be a more attractive product to sit, behind a bar, for example, just throwing that out there. The other thing we did is we have this photography company that we work with all the time. Really great company. They do a lot of great marketing. But what they did is they set up a studio, like a little tiny studio, and they just did bottle shots for the brands, right? Which are super expensive to do if you've got to set up a whole studio in your own office and everything else. And these folks were able to just put together this studio on the floor of the exhibit hall, and just shoot bottles, and then give them the files and say, use this for all of your marketing, right? There are multiple companies who I met in the 2023 show that we did in Orlando, that then I followed up and I looked on their websites, and it's like, oh, those are the pictures that they took at Access Live, that our agency took at Access Live. So again, we're partners with these small brands. We want to help them. We want to work together to make sure that whatever is the right path for them, they get on it. But to your point, Julie, it's really bespoke to the individual company, tailored to them and their needs. Every company isn't right for every single product at every single stage of their evolution.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's been such a pleasure having you here, Francis, on Served Up. There's so much knowledge that you've given our listeners over the course of this episode. It's just amazing. So, on behalf of the Served Up family, I want to thank you for spending a moment with us. And I just want to wish you some great health and a lot of peace. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being in this industry. I love working with your company, with all of our members. And I'll leave you with one thing. If you're a wholesaler, literally, I work for you. So think of me that way, as one of your employees, as a business partner, somebody I work with. So thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Francis. And I'm, again, super grateful, super excited that you're taking on the Talent Development and Diversity Council, and I'll be able to work with you on that. So lots to come in the near future, and maybe we'll have you back on sometime in the future to talk about all the great things that we're able to accomplish together.
I'm always here for you. Just let me know.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!